The most dangerous knife is not the one that flashes in an enemy's fist, but the one that sleeps in the smile of a friend, for hatred declares itself with honest thunder, while friendship, when corrupted, kills with a kiss and calls it duty. Rome learned this truth beneath a ceiling of marble and counsel, where men speak of virtue as if it were a coin and spend it as readily. Consider how a city may praise a man until his name becomes a sunrise, and then, fearing the heat of that same sun, conspire to blot him out with an eclipse of steel. Thus do republics breed kings in secret, and then tremble at the crown they themselves have hammered. Julius Caesar rose not merely as a soldier, but as a colossus of will. He was the river in flood, the standard that did not bow, the laurel that would not wilt. His victories were not counted in numbers, but in silences. Silences in the Senate when he entered, silences in the streets when his procession passed, silences in the hearts of rivals who felt their own greatness shrinking like wax near flame. He wore Rome's admiration as armor and began to mistake applause for immortality. Ambition is a wine that makes the strong man drunk first upon his own breath, and in that drunkenness, even a lion may forget the scent of hunters. He loved Rome, yes, after a manner. He loved her as a man loves a mirror that flatters him, as a master loves the obedient instrument, as a conqueror loves the map that yields. He would feed the people, forgive the defeated, seat himself above the old quarrels like a judge appointed by fate. Yet every mercy he offered carried a hook. Each pardon was a chain gilded to look like grace. Each honor bestowed upon others cast his shadow longer, until even noon seemed dusk beneath him. And the Senate, those noble names, those ancient houses, those men who held their lineage as if it were a title from the gods, felt the world tilting. They spoke of tradition and liberty, but the word that beat beneath their tongues was fear. For there is no terror like watching your old power become ornamental. A man will endure poverty sooner than irrelevance. He will endure wounds sooner than being laughed at, and he will endure tyranny sooner than confess he once invited it. So the shadow gathered. Cassius moved within it like a viper under leaves, lean with grievance, bright-eyed with calculation. His envy was not loud, it was disciplined. He knew that rage, when shouted, is easily caged, but rage when whispered can become a law. Cassius did not simply hate Caesar, he hated the feeling of being lesser in Caesar's presence. Pride is a hungry beast, and when it starves, it bites the hand that feeds it. He spoke softly to other men's wounds. He found their tender places. He pressed. He smiled.
He asked questions that were daggers wrapped in silk. "Will Rome be Rome," he would murmur, "if one man stands above the laws? If the Republic bends like a reed whenever Caesar breathes? If we call him father today, what shall we call him tomorrow?" Tomorrow. That word is the conspirator's garden. In tomorrow, every fear grows teeth. Yet Cassius knew he needed more than sharpened tongues. He needed a face the people would trust, a name that sounded like virtue even while holding treason. He needed Brutus. Marcus Brutus, noble, grave, and torn, walked through Rome as one who carried two hearts within one chest. One heart beat for friendship, the other for the stern, ancestral dream of liberty. Caesar had shown him favor, as a man embraces a younger branch of his own tree, confident the trunk will never be challenged by it. Brutus had sat near Caesar, spoken with him, been warmed by his regard. And still, in Brutus, there lived a cold inheritance, the old hatred of kings, the stories of men who cast down tyrants and were praised by history as saviors. What is a man to do when his friend begins to resemble his fear? The mind, when it wishes to commit an act it dreads, first builds a temple of reasons. Brutus raised such a temple within himself. He called it duty. He called it Rome. He called it the Republic. He called it necessity. And Cassius, seeing this temple rise, furnished it with false letters and staged murmurs. making it seem as if the city itself begged Brutus to strike. Thus did treason dress itself in noble garments and step forward as if crowned by conscience. Others joined, men who had tasted Caesar's mercy and found it bitter, men who had been overlooked, outshone, outmaneuvered, men who feared that their children would grow up calling Caesar what they dared not name aloud. They met in private rooms where lamplight trembled on anxious brows. They spoke of freedom with mouths that longed for power. They swore oaths, and their oaths were made of breath, easily given, easily broken, deadly all the same. And Caesar, in those days, walked as if fate were his servant. Omens brushed past him like cold hands, warnings from priests, dreams from his wife, murmurs in the streets. Yet he waved them away as one waves away gnats. A man who has never been stopped begins to believe he cannot be stopped. He took Rome's love as proof that the gods had chosen him, and Rome's fear as proof he was necessary. He did not see the difference between a crown offered in flattery and a crown offered as a test. He did not see that the Senate's smiles had begun to show teeth. So the Ides came. March, cruel in its bright air, cruel in its promise of spring, brought Caesar to the Senate. The city wore its ordinary face. Men greeted one another.
Business pretended to be business, and beneath this thin veil, the conspirators waited with their daggers hidden where law could not see them, beneath folds of cloth, beneath folds of speech, beneath folds of righteous intention. The hall was stone and marble, cold as judgment, white surfaces polished by the footsteps of power. Statues watched with blind serenity, as if the past itself sat in council. Caesar entered, and the room changed the way weather changes when a storm arrives, not with sound, but with pressure. Some rose, some bowed, some swallowed their fear. Caesar moved among them like a sun that forgets it can be eclipsed. He took his place. Papers rustled. Petitions approached him like prayers. And then, hands reached. Too many hands. Too close. Voices pressed him. A circle narrowed as if the Senate itself had decided to become a trap. The first blade struck. Not with the clean certainty of legend, but with the roughness of reality. An awkward cut, a startled lunge, the brief confusion of men crossing the last threshold between thought and deed. Caesar recoiled, astonished more than afraid, for his mind had not made room for betrayal in that chamber. He turned, seeking the face of reason, the familiar eye, the loyal hand. And the daggers multiplied. Steel flashed in the bright air, cloth tore, breath became a panic of grunts and gasps, and blood, hot, immediate, undeniable, spilled upon the white marble, staining it with the terrible contrast of beauty and violence. There are moments when the world reveals its true nature with a single color, and red upon white is a sermon no man forgets. Caesar fought not as a soldier fights an open field, but as a man fights in a nightmare, grasping, stumbling, trying to stand where the floor itself seems to move. He saw faces he had pardoned, hands he had clasped, eyes that had once shone with gratitude. Each wound was not merely a wound of flesh, but a wound of meaning. For what is power if it cannot purchase loyalty? What is glory if it ends in a circle of friends becoming executioners? Then he saw Brutus. All the noise in the world narrowed to that single recognition. The blade in Brutus's hand was not the sharpest. It did not need to be. Its edge was made of something older than iron, trust. Caesar's body could endure many cuts. His spirit could not endure that one. Et tu, Brute. Not as a question, not as a plea, but as the sound a soul makes when it breaks. A name turned into a funeral bell. The final blow was not steel entering flesh. It was friendship departing the earth. In that instant, Caesar's greatness fell away like a cloak. The conqueror became a man. The Colossus became a body. The sun became a shadow, and he sank down, down to the marble that had honored him, now drinking him. The Senate floor, which had heard 1,000 debates, now heard the quietest argument of all, a man's last breath. Silence followed, not peace, but the stunned silence of men who have done what cannot be undone. The conspirators stood amid the wreckage of their own resolve, breathing hard, hands trembling, eyes wide with the dawning terror of consequence. Their daggers were red, their togas were splashed, their faces looked older than they had that morning. They spoke of liberty. They proclaimed the Republic saved. They tried to lift their crime into the air as if it were a banner. But blood is heavy. It does not rise easily into ideals. Outside, Rome did not instantly become free. Rome became uncertain, and uncertainty is the mother of chaos. Words spread like fire through dry streets. Some wept, some rejoiced, most simply feared, because the city understood what philosophers often forget. When you slay a ruler, you do not slay the hunger for rule. You do not destroy the ladder by breaking the man at the top. You merely leave the ladder standing, slick with blood, and invite every ambitious hand to climb. Brutus stepped into the aftermath as if onto a stage where the play had gone wrong. He tried to speak to the people, to explain, to persuade them that this murder was medicine. Yet the crowd heard only the murder. The crowd did not taste the logic, it tasted the shock. A nation does not swallow a death and call it virtue simply because noble men recommend the flavor. And in the hush that followed Caesar's fall, another truth grew loud. Rome had not been saved. Rome had been unmoored. The deed, meant to prevent tyranny, had opened the gates to something worse: sizzle fury, rival powers, the sharpening of factions, the slow march toward a new kind of crown. For the Republic, like a fragile glass, had been struck by the hand that claimed to protect it, and now cracks raced outward, silent and swift. Look again, then, upon that marble hall, cold stone and hot blood, noble names and ignoble fear. Consider the conspirators who called themselves physicians and became butchers. Consider Caesar, who called himself indispensable and discovered that indispensability breeds knives. Consider Brutus most of all, the man who believed he could commit treason without becoming a traitor, who believed he could kill a friend and keep his soul clean. The heart does not work so. When you place your hand upon the hilt against one you love, you do not merely strike the body before you, you strike the world behind you. You teach men that loyalty is negotiable. You teach friends to look at friends with suspicion. You teach Rome, in every age, that the smile may hide a viper, and the handshake may conceal an eclipse. And what followed proved it.
The air after the assassination was not the air of freedom. It was the air of a storm waiting for thunder. The conspirators had imagined themselves as saviors. They had not imagined the emptiness that comes when a Colossus falls, the vacant space where certainty once stood, the hollow where a single will once held the city together by force of personality. Rome, staring at that emptiness, did what frightened cities always do. It sought another strong hand. So let the tale end not with triumph, but with warning. For betrayal is a seed that blooms into generations. Friendship, when weaponized, becomes the most efficient cruelty. And ambition, bright, seductive, sun-like, will always draw men toward it, even as it casts the longest shadows. Caesar fell. The daggers withdrew. The marble cooled. Yet the stain remained, not only on stone, but on the soul of Rome. The conspirators believed they had slain a tyrant and saved a republic. In truth, they had performed a darker spell. They had shown the world that power is never simply taken by force. It is surrendered by trust, traded in whispers, and, most tragically, delivered by the hands that once swore to guard it.
For when the friend becomes the assassin, the wound is not in the flesh alone. It is in the meaning of the word friend. And Rome, that day, learned to fear smiles.